Hey everybody, welcome and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and feel free to leave me a comment. I've been on a mission to cook more for the family, mainly to save money, but I must say I'm getting better at quickly whipping up some of our favorite meals. Today's video is a compilation of easy recipes, starting with tacos. That beef was frozen solid, and I had no idea. It was already in the pan, so I had to make it work. If you're ever in a similar situation, just keep moving the meat around in the hot pan and scrape off chunks as it thaws. Once the meat is nice and brown, you will want to pour off some of the excess grease before this step. Okay, so we found this Spanish style rice from Rice-A-Roni, and hands down, it's our favorite. It's a combination of rice and vermicelli noodles, because it's Rice-A-Roni, like rice and macaroni, get it? The ingredients call for canned tomatoes, but we don't add those. I use a little bit more butter than recommended to saute the rice and noodle mix in a skillet. I also mix the seasoning and water first versus pouring in separately. I need to start substituting water with chicken or maybe beef broth, but anyway, it still comes out good. So this is me sauteing the rice and the noodle mix in butter. The rice will mostly stay the same color, so watch the noodles to see when you've toasted it enough, because those noodles will burn. Now I'm ready to mix the rice seasoning and water before I pour it in. I made 2 boxes of rice. So that's why you see me pouring 2 packets, but each box comes with 1 packet of seasoning. I like to pour a little water at a time and mix it up, then I add more as I go. All right, the rice and noodle mix is ready. Stir everything together and then turn the heat down so you can let it simmer. This will give the rice time to actually cook. Make sure you watch it because you don't want to cook out all the liquid or that'll burn your rice. Look at that. The rice is done. We like to warm flour tortillas and corn ones for our tacos. With the corn tortillas, you need to add oil to the pan to warm them. I struggle saying that. Tortillas. Tortillas. Add your favorite cheese and veggies, maybe some refried beans, and you're all set for taco night. I'm making some potatoes. So I'm gonna let these boil. I'll put some salt in the water. Once they get soft, then I will take them out of the water and I will mash them up. I've got some sour cream and I've got some milk that I'm gonna put in there, as well as some butter. All the fats are going in there. And then we bought some pork chops. We haven't had pork chops in a very long time. These are thin cut. You can kind of see that they're not too thick, they're thin cut. And I'd actually planned to cook them yesterday and decided against it because I was tired. So we had hamburgers instead, but I'm going to make these for dinner tonight. So they were already seasoned. I seasoned them yesterday. They were sitting in the fridge, so I'm taking them out now. I'm gonna get them out of this container so they can get to room temperature. And I am just going to cook them in a pan with some olive oil, like nothing fancy. And then we're going to have some biscuits. So I thought I bought the regular grains biscuits, but I got the flaky layers. So we'll be having flaky layers. We'll be having flaky layers, oh Lord. Anyway, and then I'm making some gravy. But I'm trying my best to perfect making gravy. Now I can't make it completely from scratch. I do like to start with this. But what I'll do is I'll take some of the crumbs and a little bit of the oil that the pork chops are going to leave behind, and I will mix this up in water first. Although I do have some beef broth, so maybe I'll mix it up in beef broth. I'm making this a concoction because it's gonna be beef broth with the poultry gravy, and we're pouring it on top of some pork. Anyway, it's gonna be delicious. Have a larger pan. I underestimated the width of having two pork chops side by side. So I'm actually just gonna shimmy the oil around just to make sure that it does get on all the areas of meat. Now this is thin, so you don't need to cook it for too long on either side. I'd say like a minute, maybe two. And then temp it just to check and be sure. I'm sure someone's watching this like, oh girl, you only need a minute and 30 seconds or whatever. But I like to temp my meat just to be sure. So you can kind of see here around the edges that it's already starting to cook around the edges, and so that's a good sign. I do want it to actually brown though, so I may let it stay just for a little bit longer. So I have my tongs that I'm using over here to pick up the raw meat to put it in. Then I have a fork that I'm using to turn it over. And then I'll probably use a spatula to take it out because I just don't want to deal with cross-contamination, right? I know some people might take those exact same tongs and use it to flip it over, but the underside of this meat is cooked. So I don't want to put something raw on top of it. So let's see how we're doing. I'm going to use this fork to kind of peek, take a look and see how we're doing. Looking good. So I'll go ahead and flip this one over. Now notice how this one over here has started to curl up. Sometimes I like to press it down just to make sure that it's actually getting cooked all the way through. Anyway, I feel like we're good. So it's just been a few minutes. Just look underneath. Yeah, that looks nice. So I'm actually going to take this and bring it over here to my plate. Just to show you what I mean, I just stuck a fork through that potato right there, and you saw that it is done. You'll definitely want to check the large pieces too, because the small ones will be finished quickly, but you want to check your large pieces to make sure they're done. All right, so I have drained my potatoes. I'm just going to put them right back in the same pot, and I'm going to use this masher. I know some people may use a mixer to really get them blended smooth, but I like to use the masher. I think it does a good job. And I'll add my butter and milk and sour cream. Okay, so I have mashed up my potatoes and they have butter in them. I'm gonna add a little bit of milk in there. Ooh, I didn't realize that was full all the way to the top. And continue mashing to help it get a little creamy. I was gonna add sour cream in here, but that's how I like them. The family doesn't really like sour cream, so I'm gonna be nice tonight and just go ahead and mash these up. I'll taste it after. I haven't added any more salt, not any more than what was in the water, but I will taste it to make sure it tastes good, and then I'll add some pepper in too. Okay, the oven is ready. It has preheated. So put these bad boys in, and they'll stay in here for, it says 13 to 16 minutes, so I'll set a timer probably for 15 minutes. And all right, the timer just went off. Let's check on my biscuits. Ooh, they look so good. Now, I personally like them a little bit browner on top, so I'm just gonna let them sit. I'm afraid to actually put them on broil because I don't want to burn them. But I have turned off the oven, so I'm just going to be mindful and let it sit, which should be okay because I am on my last pork chop anyway, so I'm about to start making this gravy. And now I need to check to see where the guys are, because hopefully they're close to coming home. So I've taken the last piece of meat out of the pan. Now I'm ready to go ahead and pour in this mixture. I just decided to go with water. You may want to lower the heat. You can hear that sizzle, so like it's already starting to cook. And that's not really what you want with your gravy. You want it to like slowly simmer, but you definitely want to stir the entire time, because if you pour it in here and it starts to cook, then you're going to end up getting lumps, which I can see already. So I need to stir like a little bit faster. But as much as possible, you don't want to get lumps. So you just want to keep constantly stirring so that it doesn't settle on the bottom and give you lumps. Okay, let me focus on this. I'll let y'all see the finished product in a little bit. All right, I've added more water, and so you see it has a looser consistency. It's not thick like it was before. You do want it to be runny. I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off and just keep it off the eye because ultimately it's done. You don't necessarily need to like keep it on here for a long time to cook it, but if you keep it in the warm pan, that does help. Oh yeah, that's definitely more like it. I'm going to go ahead and transfer these bad boys to their own plate so that way they won't keep cooking on the bottom. Dinner is served. We've got pork chops, mashed potatoes, gravy, biscuits, and actually I'm gonna have some collard greens too, but I didn't make those from scratch. It's glory greens. So I'm gonna take those out of the can and heat them up for myself. Yay! Okay, so tonight for dinner we're going to have this grass-fed beef bottom round roast. We've got 2.25 pounds of meat here, and I've already given it an opportunity to thaw in the sink. I did kind of speed up the process a little bit, and I put it in some lukewarm water because this is a thick cut of meat, which I will now show you. Look at that. So this is a very thick cut of meat, and I wanted to make sure that I gave this enough time to truly like get seasoned thoroughly. So I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the package and prepare to season it. So for the seasonings, let me show you what I have. It's just a little bit of everything. That's something that you will notice, that when I'm seasoning things, unless I'm following a recipe, then it's going to be a little bit of everything that I have that I know tastes good together, and I'm not measuring any of it. I'm just putting it all in. So I'm going to put some seasoning salt in there. I also have some minced onion because I'm going to put some broth. I have some beef broth. So I'll have this to be seasoned on it. Sorry, I'm just grabbing things all out of order. So this, as well as some other seasonings, will go on the meat, and I'm going to sprinkle this into the broth once I have the meat all together in the Instapot. So back to the meat, right? Seasoning salt on the meat, also some garlic powder on the meat, some onion powder on the meat, and then I just love this Montreal steak season. Like, I do put it on almost everything. So again, these here are going to go on the meat. This is going into the broth. This is also going into the broth, liquid smoke. We absolutely love this. A little dab of do you don't need too much or will overpower the meat. I also have some Worcestershire in the refrigerator, and then my beef broth is in the refrigerator as well. meat all seasoned, the next step is to heat up our skillet, and we are going to sear the meat on all sides to help hold in the juices. So you'll know that the oil is ready when it's like a lot more loose in the pan. You can kind of see how this is running around more loose like water and not so thick like oil. And also it may smoke a little bit. You don't want it to smoke too much, but if it starts to smoke a little bit, that lets you know that it's done. So I'm gonna go ahead and add the meat. I like to use the 2 spatula method for heavy meats to get them in the pan. Now you want to let it sit for like 2 minutes on each side because the oil in the pan is so hot, it will sear quickly. But you don't want to have it sit for too long on either side because the goal is not to actually cook the meat. You're going to cook the meat when you put it in the crock pot. The goal is to simply brown the outside of the meat. So as it's cooking, the juices stay inside of it. For the most part, they'll stay inside, and that'll allow the meat itself to be tender. Smells so good. Makes me want to take a bite out of it right now. This is a crock pot, or I guess maybe slow cooker is the better term. I don't know. But anyway, this is a crock pot that was given to me for like my first apartment. I feel like it was maybe my mom that gave it to me. I don't know. But anyway, I love it. So one thing that I always use is these slow cooker liners. They make it so much easier for cleanup. You see the bag just like goes around it. The food is inside the bag. You just pick everything up and like get, you know, all of your leftovers from the bag, and then you can toss it. As long as you're not crazy when you are stirring, that's what will get you. Because the bag itself, it's pretty thick, but it's still just a plastic bag. And of course it gets soft, right? It gets soft as it cooks. So when the time comes to like spoon out your food or scoop out your vegetables and things like that, be very careful that you don't actually rip the bag, because that's going to defeat the purpose, and then you will end up having to clean the pot itself. I do still like wipe my pot out each time, but I don't have to like worry about, you know, food being caked inside of it. So when you, let me move this so you can see a little bit better. So once you've put the liner in your crock pot, if you have a crock pot like mine, you'll also have this rubber gasket. So the rubber gasket, it can be tough and challenging to put around sometimes, but just take your time and put this rubber gasket all the way around, and that will help ensure the bag stays secure, especially when you put the lid on it. So let me tussle with this for a bit. Okay, so now let's get ready to put in our broth. So I use beef broth, 50% less sodium, because we have quite a bit of sodium, I'm sure, already from our seasoning. So I'll pour that in. I don't really measure stuff, but now I should, unless I'm following a recipe completely. So I don't know, maybe 3-4 turns around is enough. Then I'm gonna add in a little bit of the seasoning salt, just because there's not a lot on the meat, but I do like it kind of like cooked into the broth. So just gonna sprinkle a bit in there, and then I'm gonna go ahead and use the last of this because there's just not much left anyway. So I will sprinkle all of that in there. And then I forgot to pick up onion, but we always keep minced onion on hand. So I'm gonna put some of that in here. Like, please don't come for me. We just don't always have like everything that I want and need. But I make do with what I have, you know, so, and it still comes out okay. I'm also gonna add some pepper, just because I didn't put any on the meat. So with that, I'll just kind of pour it in here. Ooh, that might be too much. I really do be winging it sometimes with the seasonings. And so far it's been okay. Sometimes it'll be a little bit too salty, but I'm not as heavy-handed if the meat is a smaller cut. This is a thicker cut, so I want to make sure that it does get seasoned all the way through. And then our absolute favorite is liquid smoke. We love to put this Okay, not sure what's going on there, but anyway, that was Jackson. Let me go check on him. Okay, so how about he was barking because he didn't realize that I had come back into the kitchen. So he was in another part of the house barking, basically looking for me. So I'm gonna stir all of this in together. And now I'm gonna add the liquid smoke. And as I was saying, it doesn't take a lot of the liquid smoke, right? Like you can even see on here, it says for marinades, you only want like 2 teaspoons. So I usually do like 3. I probably should have measured this out, but I don't. See, like it's open, so you gotta be careful. But I usually do like a few drops, like maybe a drop or so, and that seems to be good. I'm saying a drop, but you'll see what I mean. Yeah, of course, with you guys watching, I messed up, but anyway, it works for us. And I love that you can even smell it. Like I can already smell the liquid smoke, which it gets me so excited. It makes me want to eat some of this right now. All right, so now let me get this meat. I'm gonna shift you all a little bit for a better angle. Okay, so we have our crock pot all prepared and ready to go. We have our meat prepared and ready too. You'll notice that it does have like some blood and juices coming out of it. That's because it's not completely done. We only seared the outside. So this is what we want. You don't want to overcook it and then it's gonna be all dry. And if it's all dry and you put it in a crock pot, like I've never seen meat come back to life when it's all dry already and you put it in the crock pot. So I don't recommend overcooking it. Okay, so now I have it all in there, and you'll notice that I did pretty good in terms of the level of the seasoning and the liquid, just enough to coat around the sides, because by this being in this plastic, and then also I am putting the lid on top, it becomes like a sweat lodge, so to speak. And so there'll be condensation and like enough of the liquid like dripping down on the meat. So you don't necessarily have to completely cover your meat with liquid. That's my recommendation. Now, if you're doing some sort of recipe that tells you differently, then follow that. But whenever I'm doing meat like this, I don't always completely cover, but I do want to at least make sure there's enough for the sides to be covered. Okay, so now I'm going to plug it in and turn it on. Oh, I didn't know that y'all could see me. Hey. Okay, I have my crock pot all plugged in. Be mindful of how your crock pot works, or slow cooker. Because for some, as soon as you plug it in, you're good to go. But for others, that's not the case. And I have been in situations where I plugged it in and like these lights and stuff came on and it made me think that it was working. And then in the middle of the day, I realized I couldn't smell anything. And it's because even though the lights came on, nothing was happening. So you want to make sure that you turn it on. For these old school ones, it's pretty simple to realize whether or not it's off or it's on. So I'm going to put this on low because I just want it to continue cooking like throughout the day.